So can we please give a massive welcome to the one and only Mike Hatchard.
Well, thank you very much. I feel I've been over-bigged up here tonight, but and I've never done one of these things before, but I'll do my best. Prior to the lockdown, I was actually doing quite a few speeches. People kept asking me, you know, people like the Oddfellows or the WI, they said, can you talk about your life? And I said no, because I haven't done anything. And anyway, they talked me into it. And I do remember the first one I did, I sort of made a few notes, and I had no idea what to expect at all, you know. And I thought, what am I going to do? I haven't really done that much, you know. It's going to be a real challenge. And I'd realised after a while that I'd been speaking for about 50 minutes, and I'd only got up to about the age of 15. So it could be a problem for me. So I better. How long? I've got to do a quarter of an hour. Is that right? And it is now, right, 8:22. Okay, so get me off with a boat hook at 8:37 if necessary. So I'll just give you a bit of a preamble as to how I cycled out one midsummer morning, which I'm sure you recognise as being a reference to a book by Laurie Lee, which I read when I was very young. But prior to that, I started playing the piano when I was 10, and I guess I was a bit unusual really, because I just sat down at the piano one day, and I worked out that I discovered that I could play by ear. I played thing from Z-Cars, and I could sort of work it out and found that quite exciting. And I went out the next day and I bought the music, The Puppet on a String, which cost me 3 shillings. My pocket money at the time was 2 and 6. And I taught myself to play it by a sort of process of osmosis, I think, because I took this music to bed with me. And I was obsessed. I learned all these songs. And I'd meet so many kids that are encouraged to play the piano. My background was rather unusual. My mother was initially quite encouraging, but after a while she said, no, you can't just play the piano all day, shut up, you know. And they decided that I was only allowed to play the piano from 6 to 7 every night. That was my 1 hour of playing the piano. And I went to the school I went to, there was no music at all. And I used to sit there just thinking about music all day. It completely ruined any opportunity I might have had for an academic career. Just obsessed with music. And I got caught once by Mr. Poyner, the physics teacher, because we were sitting at the back of the class, at the back of the laboratory in physics, and all the other kids, they were sort of smoking and reading comics, you know, chewing gum, whatever you do at school, doing drugs. Oh, blimey. No, as the audience suddenly sort of doubled in size, or just rather lethargic of getting back. Oh, okay. And I was writing what I thought rather pretentiously was a symphony. And Mr. Poyner thought he caught me out. He said, okay, all right, Hatchard, you know, all right. Okay, hand it over. What have you got there? And he, you know, sort of, what the bleeding hell's this? You know, he suddenly resorted to the vernacular. And I said, it's a symphony, sir. You know, what? And he looked at me and said, yeah, well, don't do it in physics, you know. And I got a detention for that. But my sort of professional career got off to a really weird start, because I was 14. I'm not kidding, 14, and I was out pub crawling with my mate Stanley, and we walked past the Branksome Arms in Poole in Dorset, and there was a piano. You could see it through the window, and he said, you play the piano, come on. He was a year older than me, absolutely absurdly confident, and he went in and he said to the barman, is it all right if my friend plays the piano? And the barman sort of looked at him and said, yeah, I suppose so, all right. And all these guys playing darts, right, over the piano. So they moved the dartboard slightly to the right, just sufficiently so that if I did play, I might not get punctured. And I sat down at the piano, and I thought, well, I'm not going to play you can't play Mozart in a pub. So I just started playing all these tunes that I taught myself. And all these people, suddenly, someone gave me money, they started giving me money. I always remember somebody gave me, it makes me feel so old. Somebody gave me a florin, a 2-bob bit, you know, which was a fortune. And then people started asking me if I'd like drink. And I'd never really had a drink before. And so I said, yeah, what do you want then? And I said, I'll have a pint of keg. Because I'd heard somebody order that on I don't know, Coronation Street the night before or something. And then somebody else said, here, you a dab hand on that, old Joanna. Let me get you a drink, my son, as well, you know. And I didn't want to give the game away that I didn't know about drinking culture. So I thought, I'll have something different, you know, to show. So I said, I'll have a whiskey. and then added gin, and then creme de menthe, you know, all these drinks were arriving, right? And I put them all on top of the piano, and they're all different colours, especially the creme de menthe. And most of them, I thought they were horrible. Sort of tried a pint of beer, you know. Oh, Jesus, very nice, thank you. You know. Creme de menthe, I really like that. I got kind of hooked. Anyway, and I'm playing away. And by the way, what Mrs. Bowling said, my piano teacher, she said that it mattered what you played in the left hand. She was lying, because I discovered that it didn't really matter. Provided you hit any note in the left hand, you know, just more or less within, I don't know, down there somewhere, it was fine. Nobody seemed to mind at all. They carried on buying me drinks. And, well, I don't actually remember. I don't remember the rest of that evening, funny enough. I don't know why not. But anyway, when I was 15, my piano teacher moved to Wales, which I don't think it was personal. And she turned up one day and she said, I've got 4 violins in my attic, which I don't want. Would you like them, Michael? So I said, yeah, okay. So me and my mate Stanley with 4 violins, and I taught myself to play it in a very weird way. I walked down to Sandbanks one afternoon, which is about 5 miles, and when I left, I couldn't play the violin. And by the time I got there, I'd sort of worked out how to do it. I kept stopping every half a mile or so. I'd stop by the side of the road, get the fiddle out and try something on it. By the time I got there, I could sort of play it. It must have been awful. I can't imagine what a dreadful fiddle player it was. But when you're 15, you can be incredibly overconfident in some ways, can't you? And I must have been quite confident because I went busking about 2 weeks later, and I was playing in a subway in Poole. And by the most weird coincidence, a couple of weeks after that, I was hitchhiking to visit my girlfriend in Folkestone, and I got a lift with 4 Irish guys who told me they'd stolen the car. They're quite upfront about the fact. They said, we stole this car, you know, from Hemel Hempstead. And they drove me to Eastbourne. That's the first time I ever came to Eastbourne in a stolen car. And they said, if you want the car, you can have it. We're going to leave it here. And they left. And I was 15. And I found myself just down the road in possession of a stolen car, which I couldn't drive. So I sort of stalled it and left it. Very strange. Anyway. And when I was 16, there was an advertisement in Melody Maker for a piano player wanted on the Costa Dorada. And I wrote a letter, which I don't have now. I wish I'd kept a copy of it, because it must have been the most bizarre letter. Because I said, yeah, I'll be perfect for your job, you know, whatever. And I got a letter back and said, thank you for your application. You sound like you'd be ideal, but we found somebody, but we'll keep you in mind. And then a bit later, I got a telegram, and it said, pianist has broken leg, come out as soon as you possibly can, and tell us by telegram when you'll arrive. Seriously. And I sent a telegram back and said I'll be out next Wednesday. Never been abroad before. I flew to Barcelona in a three-piece pinstripe suit, which seemed appropriate. Got on a train, went 30 miles up the road, turned up at Calalia, and this woman came out and she looked at me and she said, oh, Jesus Christ, she said, you're not Mr. Hatchard. I said, yeah. She said, oh God, you only look about 20. I said, well, I'm 16. She said, what? She said, oh no, your letter suggested, I thought you were 50 at least from your letter. So I don't know what I would have written, but anyway. And she said, well, you go home. And I nearly cried. She said, you can't possibly do a job like this, you know. She said, what are you going to do? What are you going to do if somebody says, you know, play If You Were the Only Girl in the World? I said, well, I'd play it. She said, well, there's a piano, play it. So I sat down and played it, and she said, oh, all right. And I was out there for 6 weeks, and I don't drink very much these days. And the reason I don't drink very much these days is probably because I got it all out of my system. Because everyone used to buy me drinks all the time. I used to crawl home every night. Anyway, how long have I done? Because I was worried about this. Because I've only got up to 16, and this is supposed to be about the fact that I read, as I walked out one midsummer morning by Laurie Lee, and I read that when I was a teenager. I thought, what a great book. And I'm sure you know, it's all about how Laurie Lee went out to Spain, and he used to make a living just playing the violin on street corners. And I wrote to Laurie Lee. I sent him a letter when I was 19. I know that because in his book there's this wonderful phrase. It said, I was 19 and soft at the edges. So when I wrote to him, I said, I'm 19 And I'm still rather soft at the edges. Don't know what that meant, but I said, I'm going to do what you do, what you did. And he sent me a postcard. And he said, keep off the main roads and always take a journal with me. So I thought, okay, I'll do that. And I then got put in the local Echo, the Bournemouth Echo, because I decided that I was going to do this. And I think my uncle told them about it. And I was kind of committed, because they turned up and wanted to take a photograph with me. And I said, yeah, I'm going to cycle to Morocco, and I'm going to go with no money, just like Laurie Lee, no money and a violin. And so they said, great, can we take a photograph of you playing the violin on your bicycle? So I said, well, that's not easy. But they said, no, you'll be okay. So I got on the bike, and I cycled down Evering Avenue, and every now and again I tried to cycle no-handed playing the violin, which is not an easy thing to do, okay? And I couldn't do it, but they were very encouraging. They said, yeah, keep going, you know. And eventually I sort of managed it, and they took a photo, and I fell off the bike, and I was lying in the road, and they said, that's great, thank you very much, off they went. And when I saw this little bit of, I suppose the first bit of publicity I'd ever had, I thought, yeah, I better go and do it now. So I went up to Southampton. I took a ferry over to Le Havre, and I literally had £5 on me. I was 19 at the time, and I cycled to Paris, and that took a day. It was I think it was about 125 miles, and I just cycled and cycled. And when I got to Paris, I suddenly felt incredibly scared, because I've not really done very much busking apart from that early attempt that I told you about when I was 15. And I thought I'd better find a place where I could busk. Now, I'll just use this. So I found this park. I don't know which part of Paris it was in. And there were railings and everything, and I thought, oh, this will do. So, oops. That's absolutely perfect. So, so there's all these railings in there. I'm just standing against these railings, feeling very, very self-conscious. And in his book, as I stepped out one midsummer morning, Laurie Lee was very specific that you had to sort of pre-guess your audience's taste in music, and that was the way to make money. So if you see sweet old ladies coming, you get all sort of romantic and make them feel sorry for you. If you saw younger people with beers, do a jig or something like that, whatever. Or if people look a bit more I could sort of mess around at that for hours. Anyway, after half an hour, I'd made half a franc, which is the equivalent of about 6p. That's all I'd made. And I was starting to feel a bit despondent about it. And then suddenly this lorry pulled up in front of me and decided to park where I was playing, just reversed into me. I almost became chips, And I thought, I don't like this very much. So I thought, I'll go on to the south of France. I'm sure if I get to the south of France, I can busk down there, that'll be all right. And I thought I could do it in about 6 days. Now, Laurie Lee told me to always keep a journal, so I did. So I know that my memory is not playing tricks with myself. But when I read it now, some of it I think, that can't be true, surely. I mean, for example, I read the other day, it said, I'm feeling very proud of myself. I cycled all day, I did over 100 miles, no food, no drink. Right? Yeah, seriously. And it's all written down. And at night, so I'd literally get up in the morning, cycle all day, and at night I'd just stop in a field, no tent, just a sleeping bag, and then I'd carry on and do it the next day. And it took me about 8 or 9 days to get down to Narbonne Plage. And by that time, I was absolutely starving. Now, back then, no credit cards, no money, no backup, nothing, literally just a change of underwear, a sleeping bag, a fiddle on the back. And I was so hungry at one point. I remember I stopped one morning. There was on the edge of a farm, there was this basket full of stale bread for the birds. And it seems funny that at the time, I remember feeling really guilty about it, I suppose that's how you are when you're younger, but I took one of these pieces of bread and I ate a lot. I was so hungry. And on another occasion, I got to a vineyard and I spent the night in this vineyard and all these unripe grapes. And I was I remember once I started, I could not stop. I was just literally plucking these things. And I just ate and ate. You can imagine what I did to my stomach. I mean, fortunately, I got down to Narbonne Plage. And it was about 11 o'clock at night when I eventually got there. So I started playing away, and I thought this is make or break time, because I don't know what I'd done, you know. And people did start giving me money, quite a lot of money. By that time, I was hallucinating, you know. I was standing there thinking, wow, somebody's just given me a sausage roll, you know. There's a cheese sandwich. But I couldn't actually turn any of that cash into food, because at that time of night, shops simply weren't open in the way they would be now. I'm talking about 1974, I think, or thereabouts. And so I had to wait. The only place that was open was an ice cream kiosk. So again, in much the same way that I'd OD'd before on unripe grapes, I now ate loads of ice cream. So you can imagine the state of my guts. But when I got to Narbonne Plage, and the plan was to cycle to Morocco. But unfortunately, that wasn't going to happen, because after a couple of days, when I was feeling quite confident to go out every day and just play the violin and make a bit of dosh. But I was very cavalier. I left my bicycle unguarded at night when I go on the seafront and play. And when I came back one night, somebody'd stolen the only thing that was worth stealing from my saddlebag, and that was my passport. And this is something else that strikes me now. I almost feel like I'm making this up. I went to the police station the next morning, and I explained in very bad French, you know, mon passeport, c'est volé, monsieur, you know. And this guy, he said, oh, okay. So this policeman got out, he went to a drawer, he got out an emergency passport, he asked me my name, I gave him my name, he filled it in, address, whatever, and signed this, monsieur, and they gave me a passport, just sign it. And, except, they stipulated that I could stay in France as long as I wanted to with this emergency passport, and I could go home, obviously, but I couldn't, this would not get me into any other country. So I wasn't allowed to go to Spain, so that kind of, that sort of justified that. So I didn't feel bad about that, because I don't know if I would have made it to Morocco, but that became the pattern of my life. Every summer thereafter, I would get on a bike, and I would just go over to France, and I never had any money on me. I always did it in a very sort of pure way. And I would always be completely skinned. And one year I went, I think it was 76, the year of the heat wave, and I really went mad. I cycled all the way down France, across the centre of Spain, back up to France again, over to Italy, and I got all the way to the Alps. And then eventually I couldn't, I thought, no, I don't want, I've had so much of this. Suddenly I thought, I don't want to do it anymore. It's weird, and the sense of adventure was unbelievable at times. I mean, I remember I'd turn up in a place like Saint-Tropez, and I wouldn't know anybody. Within 2 or 3 days, I felt a lot of people would come and greet me every evening, you know, ça va, monsieur, and invite me to beach parties, you know. We are having the party on the beach. You come, you play, we feed you, and it always felt. I suppose when you look back on it now, I'd probably be diagnosed with being on the spectrum or whatever, but I was perfectly happy, really. They were great times, just being completely on my own, just cycling absurd distances all the time, eating very little, and just playing music in subways. But anyway, I'd had enough, and I got home. I got back one summer. I was in Dijon. And I decided, for some reason, I just couldn't cycle another mile. I don't know why. I thought, no, it's been great, but I can't do this anymore. And I tried hitchhiking, but with a bicycle. and I tried this. And funny enough, I did get a lift quite early on. This couple that were on their honeymoon in a camper van. They gave me a lift of about 25 miles with the bike. So I knew it was possible. And then they dropped me by the side of it. I was there for hours and hours. And people must have... I suppose any driver watching me also thought, well, what's that idiot doing? You know, does he seriously think we're going to stop for somebody with a bicycle? And I'd given up, and I wasn't sure what I was going to do. I was actually feeling quite desperate as well, 10:30 at night. And I remember thinking, okay, that's it. One more lorry, or one more vehicle that could possibly house a bicycle, and if that doesn't stop, I'm going to give up. And a vehicle came along and didn't stop, so that was it. And as I walked down the road, a lorry came around the corner, and it stopped. And this guy, they took me all the way to Paris, and they had the freezing compartment in the back of the lorry, in which they put my bike. And I remember saying to this lorry driver, I said, j'ai cru que c'est impossible. And he said to me, dans la vie, toutes les choses sont possibles. And when I got to Paris at about 4 in the morning, they went to the back and they gave me my bicycle, which was completely frozen in a block of ice. So I couldn't actually ride it, I had to wait till it thawed out. And I remember other things that amazed me when I look back on it. I can't believe how cavalier I was. I was sleeping under a bridge in Paris on the Seine one night. And previous to this, I'd been in Barcelona railway station sleeping. And I woke up about 3 in the morning, I guess, and somebody was stealing my violin, which was next to me. So I got pretty annoyed with them, just grabbed it back and went back to sleep. On this occasion, I was using the violin as a pillow in order to avoid that eventuality. And I remember waking up in the middle of the night, and this guy was trying to steal the violin from under he was trying to prize my pillow, Which now, would absolutely terrify me. But at the time, I screamed at him, and off he went, and I went back to sleep. Yeah. Anyway, I guess we are running out of time. Have I got another? No, have I been flashing like 1 minute? Okay. Yeah. So to cut a short story, very long. Anyway, years later, 50 years later, I was talking about all this to a friend that turned up to see me on a gig, and I was saying that I still had this weird ambition to do something similar, and he talked me into cycling from Land's End to John O'Groats to celebrate my 60th birthday, towing an electric piano. Which I did, and that's it really. That's what I'm writing the book about. And that's it. Well, I've only got a minute, so I can't. But do check it out. Anyway, thank you very much.
Fantastic. Hatchard, ladies and gentlemen.